Good afternoon to you. Mark Stott of HurricaneTrack.com here with your off-season edition of the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion. It's Monday, the 25th day of January, 2021. A lot to talk about today, so let's get right on with it. We're going to talk about beneficial precipitation out west. That's going to be the main topic. Of course, we're going to go over some of those things that we look at in the off-season, sea surface temperature anomalies, the SOI, stuff like that, certainly. But I'm telling you, the big focus today is on when the weather is bad, sometimes it can be good, and all that implies. So we'll get to that. First, real quick, our graphics producer over in the UK also produces videos. This is from the snowfall, a time-lapse of it in the United Kingdom over the weekend. I appreciate that, Kari. Kari also makes the title cards and the thumbnails that we have here on YouTube. But this is the snow over in the United Kingdom. Even my brother and his family who live in the London area got to enjoy some of the white stuff. Nothing like that in my neck of the woods. I'm in southeast North Carolina, and I don't see anything coming anytime soon. We'll get to that as well in our update for this week. Thanks, Kari, for putting that together. All right, let's get on with it. The updated sea surface temperature anomalies. This is valid yesterday. It's always a day behind, but we can see, looking at what's going on out there, a slight increase in the anomalies in the eastern Pacific. A little bit of a relaxation of the trade winds probably led to that. Meanwhile, though, out in the central Pacific and even on further west than there, the cold La Nina pattern holds on strong. In the meantime, in the tropical Atlantic from Africa all the way through the Caribbean, warmer than the long-term average, especially out here in the extreme eastern Atlantic. And then whatever's going on up here in the northwest Atlantic, oh my goodness, we're talking about 4, 5, 6 degrees Celsius above the long-term average. Some very warm positive anomalies there, which is, I guess, a double positive. A warm positive, a positive anomaly pattern that is exceedingly so in the northwest Atlantic. Bottom line is the Atlantic, we just put a big old plus sign for here, warmer than average, and generally speaking, the Pacific is colder than average. A few fluctuations week over week, as you would expect, but no major changes. We can see that reflected in the Southern Oscillation Index as well, both in the tabular format here, the 30-day at 16, the 90-day at plus 13, and the contributor for today at plus 10. We look at it graphically as well. A little bit of a decline in the 30-day average overall, not too steep, not too dramatic, but overall too. Notice that the longer term 90-day a little bit flatter as of late, but still continuing on its upward climb. Bottom line, that will hold this La Nina pattern generally in place. The SOI is part of it. It's not everything, but it generally promotes this fairly favorable easterly wind regime where the pressures are generally lower in the western Pacific, way over here, than they are in the eastern Pacific, and so the net flow of wind and air, and this is a very vastly oversimplification explanation of it, but the net flow of air across that region is generally from east to west, keeping everything nice and mixed up out here, and the El Nino, the anomalous warming of the Pacific, held at bay, so to speak. All right, looking at actual sea surface temperatures, this is kind of interesting. Remember we showed you that the anomalies up in this part of the Atlantic are quite a bit warmer than average. And that being said, the water temperatures are still cold. 10 degrees Celsius, 8 degrees Celsius. It's very cold off the coast of Nova Scotia, certainly cold in the Gulf of Maine, but not as cold as it should be, definitely. And you can tell another way to kind of observe this, that it's not as cold as it should be, is the gradient. The difference between the temperatures up here and the temperatures to the south is not that much, relatively speaking, at least compared to what we've been used to seeing. And so you see the gradient line through here, the difference in temperature over distance is not that steep. And so you don't have that thick, multicolored line of isotherms down here where there's so many of them packed in that it almost looks black. I mean, kind of a tight gradient down here near the Capes of North Carolina, but even this, I have seen it far more densely packed The difference between the Gulf Stream and the shelf water, not that great compared to what we've seen in the past. And that is definitely a marked indication of what we're seeing up here in the Northwest Atlantic. And this is important not because of necessarily affecting the upcoming hurricane season. It might. These patterns will probably hold on. But it's mainly that we're seeing more energy in the water right now. It's warmer than it should be, which leads to more water vapor being available. Water vapor holds energy and heat, and that fuels storms. And so our storm systems can be more potent, more precipitable, if you will, if that's a way to put it. In other words, if there's more water vapor, more precipitation can fall. We know that. A moist air mass has the ability to create more precipitation. And this warmer pattern that we're seeing over the Northwest Atlantic, kind of interesting. I don't want to say it's alarming, but I'm certainly curious about it, and we'll see how long that holds on. Equally curious is the Gulf. I mean, look at this, the 26 degrees Celsius isotherm means line of equal temperature, extends all the way into the north central Gulf here. Well, close to it. I mean, there's 27 degrees latitude line right there. And if we back this out, now that you get an idea of what's what, you know, that's pretty warm. 80 degrees Fahrenheit all throughout here, and that's 81 degrees Fahrenheit right there, into the Gulf of Mexico at the end of January. And again, I want to emphasize, make it very clear, because I don't like to hype things if they don't need to be hyped. This won't affect the hurricane season probably, because the Gulf is always warm enough to support intense hurricanes. What this could influence, if we see it expand, I mean, we're only a week away from February. February is a short month, and then it's March, and then we're only 90 days away from the hurricane season. That's one way to look at it. The incoming solar radiation is on the increase right now because we are past the shortest days of the year. The sun angle is getting higher in the sky. There's more energy getting input into the Gulf, into all of our northern hemisphere oceans, and so the chances of things to cool off seem to have come and gone because the winter has not been particularly cold. We don't have a lot of cold air advection going across the Gulf, so maybe it portends an early start to the hurricane season. We'll see, but I am more concerned about this fueling storm systems, especially as we get into the spring. So we're going to have to watch and see, does this area of warmth, and this is above the long-term average, does that expand over here into the western Gulf as we get into March and April and especially May? Something to keep an eye on. Yes, it could affect the upcoming hurricane season, but I'm more interested in it in terms of how it impacts lower 48 weather. Which leads me to this, a wonderful satellite animation here for several reasons, not the least of which is what's happening out here in the west. Look at this. When you see this sort of puffy, popcorn-looking texture to the clouds, in meteorology, you automatically know that's a lot of instability, a lot of cold air aloft, and then you can also see the counterclockwise rotation to it. There's a storm system out there. Actually, the low pressure is centered here over southern Nevada, at least at the surface. Mid and upper level energy might be rotating farther to the south and west, but this, my friends, is a really good sign. You want the stormy weather. I know it's not fun to drive in. It ruins your day. It's dreary or whatever. But you want that. You want that out there because you get the snowpack, which we're going to be talking potentially 10 feet of snow or more in some of the Sierra Nevada region of California and Nevada, of course. Even down into the mountains in Mexico, Arizona, Utah, and interior portions, the Great Basin out there. This is really good news. Water, fresh water, the lack thereof, or when it's plentiful, is good for the economy. When it's on, the plentiful side, it refreshes the environment, it cleanses. There's a lot of positives sometimes when the weather is negative, when the weather is bad. And this is one of those cases. You're going to get some heavy rain. Yes, there's the threat of rainfall that could lead to some flooding and, problems that affect mankind. But us notwithstanding, this is a good thing to see. Storminess out west, a little bit too in the nation's midsection here, a little bit of heavier rain and even a few thunderstorms in parts of the mid-Mississippi Valley. But nothing you can't handle, and some overrunning moisture coming across into the mid-Atlantic, parts of the south, even my neck of the woods here. Still some cold air trapped on the east side of the Appalachians. Warmer down south. The sun is coming out almost 80 degrees near Savannah, but in the low 50s up here in Wilmington, and the upper 40s near Charlotte. It's winter, it's kind of dreary in some places, not so bad in others, but I'm telling you, I'm going to emphasize this more and more in today's update anyway for this week. Out west, that is what you want to see. That's a good thing. It really is. And you can see it reflected here on the National Watches and Warnings chart or map, whatever you want to call it. Most of the heavier weather, if you will, out west. Winter storm watches, winter storm warnings. Look at all of Arizona covered in some winter storm warnings in here into parts of New Mexico. And then, of course, through California, the Sacramento Valley, the areas where you grow food, Tucson, Yuma, outside of the bigger cities down there near Phoenix and Tucson, the growing regions of California. This is good. Trust me, it's a good thing, and we should welcome it. And yeah, there are human impacts. We get that. But use common sense, and it'll be okay. Just be smart about it. Luck favors the prepared. At least you're aware of it if you're watching this video, right? And then the nation's midsection, I'm drawing a big old red oval around it, but that's just highlighting the winter storm regions of Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, and points east. Your garden variety, average winter weather, nothing out of the ordinary there. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. Just be aware of it, which you probably are. I'm just here to remind you. Hey, our interactive tracking map that we have available to our supporters through Patreon and our HurricaneTrack Insider site. Just wanted to show it off a little bit. Some of the capabilities. First of all, this is what's going on in Pahrump, Nevada, which is outside of Vegas by about an hour or so. If there were no clouds, and there are, this area is socked in today. The Spring Mountains reside like over here. I'm trying to draw in the mountains. And right over here on the other side of those mountains would be Vegas. And if it was a clear day, you'd see the mountains. But you can't, because the rain level, the snow level, the cloud level, all of that is very low. A lot of moisture out there. And once this clears up, I'll probably do a time lapse of it. I did one the other day when they had some thunderstorms and even a nice rainbow out here in Pahrump. Thunderstorms in Vegas, snow in the Spring Mountains out there. It's on Twitter from a couple of days ago, so check that out, at HurricaneTrack on the Twitter, as they say. But the Spring Mountains are back here. Lots of rain and snow. Rain in the lower elevations, snow in the higher elevations. Just wanted to kind of show you what that looks like. It hasn't quite made it, this storm, over to Colorado Springs and the Black Forest area just yet, as I stall and wait for Nest to populate the camera feed for me. There we go. But here too, the low clouds, Pikes Peak is like right back here, but you can't see it. It's a very tall mountain there in Colorado in the Rockies. All these low clouds out here, you see the snow cover. This cam hosted by another one of our supporters out in the Colorado Springs, Black Forest area, specifically where he's located. Scott, appreciate that. Paul here in Pahrump. Elsewhere, though, not much happening. And we took some of our cameras off because they're having some glitches. I got to go fix them. But just a neat way to show you what's going on. We use this during hurricane season as well. It's even got a nice radar overlay that you can turn on and even put into motion. And you can zoom in. Pretty cool, isn't it? This is what you get if you're a part of our Patreon crowdfunding effort to support our projects. All right, moving on, the GFS. Here's the storm system out west. You can see it wound up there. And then the other storm system in the nation's midsection, the overrunning moisture that I talked about. And let's put this into motion over the next few days. More storms and rain and snow and all that good stuff out west. And then the storm system in the nation's midsection slides eastward through the Ohio Valley Great Lakes region. Then curiously, it just kind of weakens. Then, look at that. Wow, another big-time storm system coming into the west. And that's going to create a lot of heavy rain. I'm going to show you a graphic in just a second from the Weather Service. But then also keep your eyes on this little feature coming in here. It was looking like we might have a doozy of a storm. You see it starting there Wednesday, developing in the Carolinas, sliding offshore. I thought, and I was hopeful, that maybe that would wind up being like a blizzard maybe for the mid-Atlantic. It looked like it. The GFS was trolling me, and all of us snow lovers and interesting storm weather lovers, you don't want anything too intense because then you have problems. But, I wanted to get out and do some testing of some of our new equipment, and it looks like it's not going to be the case, at least close enough to shore. However, that being said, let me show you this. Is that storm system right there scoots off into the western Atlantic, it is going to become a problem for our friends over here in Bermuda, right there. Don't want to ignore Bermuda, and this is 72 hours out, 78 and beyond. You see it goes by there, comes off the coast, and that's going to create some problems, as evidenced and discussed here from Michael Johnston. In Bermuda, you look at today, this afternoon, not too bad. Not too bad tonight, tomorrow, but boy, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm not kidding. These are not typos, and no, that's not a hurricane. But these big storm systems, this gale as they call it, G-A-L-E, and in this case, a severe gale, 55 to 70 knots with maybe 30-foot seas north of the reef. Michael talks about that as well. Yikes. Howard, one of our supporters out there in Bermuda, pay attention, buddy. Maybe send us some pictures or video. Look at that. Thursday, Friday, seas up to 30 feet outside the reef. And this is what it looks like in this animation here out west. That storm system coming in. Not as easy to see as a hurricane coming, but this upper level energy, as evidenced as what Michael's talking about on that west coast storm, translates across the continent, and it develops these sort of coastal storms that get out into the ocean. We call them gale centers, and that's going to be quite the impact for our friends in Bermuda, with west to northwest winds there approaching and exceeding, as I showed you, possibly hurricane force. And then speaking of California, that's kind of rare. Look at that little red, moderate risk of flooding. Yeah, in parts of central California, that could be problematic. I know I'm heralding and trying to make it a very positive thing that you guys are going to see a lot of stormy weather, and yes, it is a good thing, but you got to also pay attention that potentially it could bring some flooding and mudslides, landslides, especially in the burn scar areas. So as always, pay attention to your local news outlets. Your local weather people are going to know about that. Follow them on Twitter, and of course your weather service. You don't have too many days of rough weather in California, at least Southern California, Central California, but this is one of those times, and we want you to be safe, we want you to be aware, and that's what this is all about. Speaking of following, I am on Twitter at HurricaneTrack, of course, Facebook as well. The whole brand is that logo there, that HurricaneTrack logo that you see. We're on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and that's a bulk of the social media that I have time for, and we are supported, of course, via Patreon, crowdfunded science. That's what we do. Patreon.com/HurricaneTrack if you want to get involved. A lot of extras for the people that help to crowdfund what we do. All right. Well, that is it from me for this week. Have a great rest of your week. And if you're out west and you get some of this weather, you're in Arizona, California, Utah, Nevada, and you get a picture or some video, please, first of all, shoot the video horizontal. Tag me on Facebook. Message me on the HurricaneTrack, what do you call it, a fan page or whatever, or Twitter at HurricaneTrack. Let me know, and I can share it with our followers as well. I wish I could go out there, but it's just not in the cards, and California's got some restrictions and all that. It's just, what a time. But you folks that are already out there, would love to hear from you, but stay safe. All right, that is it from me. Have a great rest of your week. As always, thanks for tuning in. I am Mark South, HurricaneTrack.com. We'll do it all again next week.